The wind howled through the jagged peaks of the alien world, carrying with it a strange, metallic scent. The sky was dark, painted with streaks of violet lightning that danced across distant clouds. Amid the chaos of the storm, a lone human moved carefully across the rocky terrain, a canvas pack strapped tightly to his back. His name was Eric, an explorer sent to study the uncharted planet of Vera, a world both beautiful and dangerous. Eric spotted a narrow valley between two colossal cliffs and decided it was the only place safe enough to pitch his tent. The rocks offered some shelter from the relentless wind, and the glowing moss along the cliffs bathed the valley in a soft, eerie light. With practiced hands, he assembled a small, portable tent and crawled inside, grateful for the temporary haven. The storm raged on outside. Lightning struck the cliffs in blinding flashes, illuminating the sky like some celestial battle. Eric pulled his cloak tighter and tried to sleep, his body aching from the long trek. Every muscle in his body screamed for rest, yet his mind refused to calm. Something about this planet unsettled him. The moss glowed brighter at certain intervals, as though it was breathing, and strange noises echoed from the cliffs, low rumbles, clicks, and whispers that no human tongue could understand. Hours passed, though it was impossible to tell how long in the storm's chaos. Sleep finally began to pull at him when the ground beneath the tent shivered violently. A low, deep rumble rolled through the valley, vibrating through his chest and stomach. Eric froze, heart pounding. The sound was alive, intelligent, almost like it was observing him. Before he could react, the tent's fabric shifted and stretched unnaturally. Something massive pressed against it from above. The world around him seemed to tilt. Panic rose in his throat, but he could not move. Then, as suddenly as the pressure came, it stopped. The wind outside fell silent, the storm retreating as though it too were afraid. Tent flaps rustled. A shadow darker than night spread over him, and Eric blinked, trying to make sense of it. The shape above was enormous, alien, and yet elegant, like a living fortress carved of smooth, iridescent scales. He could feel its presence not just with his eyes, but with his mind. A vibration, not sound, pulsed through him. It was neither threatening nor gentle. It was a command, a statement of power. Eric swallowed hard. He had expected danger on this planet, but nothing like this. He crawled backward instinctively, pressing himself against the far wall of the tent. The creature leaned closer, its massive head lowering, eyes, or what he assumed were eyes, glowing faintly with intelligence. He could feel its curiosity, its caution, and strangely, its loneliness. The alien's form shifted with a fluid grace. It was the Queen, he realized in a sudden flash of clarity. He did not know how he knew her title, but something ancient and commanding radiated from her presence. She was not just a predator or a monster. She was a being of power, wisdom, and sorrow, and somehow she had chosen to make her presence known to him. Eric's fear began to mingle with awe. He had read about alien life forms, even seen holographic simulations, but nothing could prepare him for the living majesty before him. He wanted to run, to hide, to scream, but something rooted him in place. The creature's vibrations entered his mind like a soft drum, telling him without words to stay calm, to observe, to understand. Minutes, or perhaps hours, passed. The Queen shifted again, this time pressing closer to his chest, the tent stretching around her massive form. He could feel her heartbeat, or was it a vibration of energy, against his body. A strange warmth radiated from her, not entirely comforting but compelling. The Queen's presence was overwhelming, yet there was a strange invitation in it. Eric struggled to breathe normally. He wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but words failed him. Instead, he reached out, his fingers brushing the iridescent scales that pressed against the tent. The sensation was electric, like touching a living crystal. The Queen responded immediately, a deep rumble resonating in his chest. It was not threatening. It was acknowledgement. Slowly, Eric sat up, cautious but curious. He could feel her thoughts, not in words, but in emotions and images. She was alone. She was waiting. She was bound to something older than the stars themselves, a curse or a duty he could not yet understand. And she had sensed him, the lone human who dared to sleep in her valley. For a long moment they simply existed together, two beings separated by species, yet connected by something deeper. The storm outside had vanished. Silence stretched across the valley, punctuated only by the soft hum of the alien forest and the distant sound of flowing water. The tent sagged slightly under her weight, yet she made no sudden moves. It was as if the world itself had paused to witness this encounter. Eric finally whispered, almost inaudible even to himself, "Who are you?" But in that silence he understood more than words could convey. She was not evil, she was not hostile. She was a queen bound by her own nature, struggling against loneliness and an unknown threat that had lasted centuries. And somehow she was letting him see it. The hours blurred. Eric felt exhaustion battling curiosity. He had so many questions, yet he dared not move too much, fearing any sudden action might trigger her wrath. Slowly, carefully, he shifted slightly closer, guided by an unspoken permission. The queen lowered her massive head, her glowing eyes meeting his with something akin to recognition. Then came a vision, unbidden but clear. It was as though her memories and thoughts were spilling into him. He saw stars burning in distant skies, entire civilizations rising and falling. He saw a war that spanned worlds where she had fought to protect her people. He felt her pain, her sorrow, and the weight of her duty. Eric gasped. The emotions were too vast for anyone human to hold, yet he did not collapse. Somehow her presence grounded him. He understood then that their meeting was not random. He had been brought here for a purpose he could not yet define, a purpose tied to the fate of worlds, both human and alien. The queen's rumble deepened, resonating through his chest. It was an invitation, a question, and a warning all at once. Eric understood. He was now bound to her, not by chains, not by force, but by fate. And the journey they would share would be dangerous, wondrous, and transformative. As dawn approached, the first pale light of Vera's sun touched the valley. The storm clouds had disappeared completely, leaving a sky painted in soft oranges and purples. The tent was silent now, save for the gentle vibrations that radiated from the queen. Eric knew that sleep would not come again, not for a long time. He reached out once more, this time without fear. The queen responded, her rumble softening into something almost gentle. For the first time, the human and the alien shared a moment of understanding, a silent acknowledgement that they were no longer alone. And then, as if testing him, the queen's presence shifted. A new vibration, sharp and urgent, entered his mind. It carried a warning. The threat he had glimpsed in her vision was real, and it was coming faster than either of them could anticipate. Eric swallowed, heart pounding. The adventure, the danger, and the connection had only just begun. He did not yet know how he would survive or if he could. But he knew this. He could not turn away. The queen pressed closer, rumbling softly, a heartbeat against his chest that echoed through his very soul. And in that moment, Eric understood one undeniable truth. His life, and perhaps the fate of countless others, was now entwined with hers forever. The valley was silent. The alien forest glowed. And somewhere, far across the planet, shadows were stirring, shadows that would test both human courage and the boundless power of the alien queen. The sun had risen over Vera, painting the valley in pale golds and soft purples. Eric sat outside his tent, eyes scanning the strange landscape. The alien forest shimmered with colors he could barely name, and the distant cliffs seemed alive with a quiet, watchful presence. The storm from the previous night had vanished, but its echoes lingered in the form of unease, like the planet itself was holding its breath. He could still feel her, the alien queen, pressed against him in the darkness. Her presence had left an imprint on his mind, not just through memory, but through the strange, almost musical vibration that pulsed deep inside him. He did not understand it fully. It was communication, but not in words. It was feeling, understanding, and warning all at once. Eric had spent the morning carefully exploring the edges of the valley. He knew he had to learn about the land, about what dangers and mysteries it held. And yet, every step he took was haunted by her presence. Sometimes he thought he saw her scales glimmering between the trees or sensed her attention following him like a shadow. By midday, he returned to the tent, exhausted but restless. He needed to understand her, and yet he feared what that understanding might bring. Carefully, he settled inside and closed his eyes, trying to focus. The vibration returned, stronger this time and more deliberate. It filled his chest and mind, demanding his attention. The queen was near, closer than he could see. He opened his eyes slowly, and there she was. Her massive form hovered outside the tent, her scales catching the light of the twin sons of Vera. Eric froze. He knew he should feel fear, yet he felt none, only awe, and something else, a strange pull of curiosity and connection that he could not explain. The queen lowered her head, and he could feel the vibration enter him, forming shapes, emotions, and images. He saw her past. She had not always been alone. Her species had once ruled an entire region of the galaxy, a civilization of beauty, intelligence, and power. But betrayal had fractured her people. A rival faction had sought control, leaving her to defend what remained. In the process, she had been cursed, bound to her emotions in a way that made her power both magnificent and dangerous. If she lost control, the energy that flowed through her could destroy everything around her. Eric shivered. He could feel fragments of her anger, grief, and loneliness crashing over him like waves, yet he did not retreat. Somehow the queen sensed it, and her rumble softened into something almost gentle, like a conversation without words. He tried to respond. Slowly, carefully, he reached out, his fingers brushing the tent fabric where her head pressed close. The vibration answered, rhythmic and warm, guiding him. It was as if she wanted him to understand her without speaking, to trust her despite everything he could not yet know. You are alone," he whispered, almost to himself. The queen's vibration shifted, carrying the weight of centuries of solitude of a life spent guarding against betrayal. And yet, beneath it all, he sensed something else, hope. She had chosen to reveal herself to him, to share a connection she had long denied anyone. Days passed in this strange, silent communication. Eric learned to interpret her pulses and vibrations. He discovered her moods, her fears, and even her curiosity about him. And in return, he shared fragments of his own thoughts, his fear, his longing for companionship, and the small joys of being human. But the planet was not empty, and their bond did not go unnoticed. Strange movements flickered at the edges of the valley, predatory creatures that had once been frightened of the queen now observing from a distance. And more troubling were the signs of intelligent life, structures, sensors, and energy signals that spoke of rivals seeking her. One evening, as twin moons rose in the sky, Eric felt a sudden, sharp change in her vibrations: alarm, urgency, and fear. He glanced outside and saw her stance stiffen, her massive body coiling like a spring ready to strike. He could feel the tension radiating from her, and with it came the warning: something or someone was approaching. He didn't wait. He crawled out of the tent, eyes wide, scanning the forest. Shadows moved between the glowing flora, tall, angular figures that did not belong. They were humanoid but alien, thin, sharp-edged, and armored with materials that shimmered unnaturally. The queen's rumble deepened, a sound that vibrated through his chest. She had always been protective of her territory, but now it was personal. Eric realized with a mixture of awe and fear that the aliens were after her, for her power, for her species, or for something he could not yet understand. Before he could react further, a pulse of energy erupted from the queen. The ground shook beneath their feet, trees bending and leaves scattering. The intruders halted, clearly unprepared for the force she wielded. The vibration that pulsed through Eric's chest intensified. He understood without thinking that her power was tied to him somehow, his presence anchoring her control. The aliens hesitated, then advanced again. The queen coiled around Eric protectively, her massive form creating a living wall. He felt the warmth of her scales, the rhythm of her heartbeat, the flow of her energy. And in that moment, he made a choice. He stepped forward, placing his hand against her side. He could feel her tension, her readiness to strike. And yet he sent back a pulse of calm, drawing from his own presence his own courage. The queen responded almost immediately, her rumble softening slightly, controlled. Together, they faced the threat. The aliens fired strange, glowing projectiles, but the queen moved with fluid grace, deflecting them with her massive tail and shimmering scales. Eric ran alongside her, dodging debris, helping to guide her attacks. They were a team united by trust, by fear, by the unspoken bond that had formed over days of shared understanding. Hours, or perhaps minutes, passed in a blur of motion, energy, and sound. By the time the aliens retreated into the forest, it was clear that the queen had been tested, and Eric had passed the test as well. The bond between them had strengthened, deepened, become more than curiosity or survival. That night, as they returned to the valley, Eric felt the weight of exhaustion and adrenaline. He sat beside the queen, her massive body coiled around the tent like a protective shadow. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel something beyond fear or awe, admiration, respect, and a fragile, growing trust. He spoke softly. "I don't understand everything about you, but I want to." It carried the weight of centuries of loneliness, of power restrained by wisdom. And in that moment, Eric realized that he was not just an observer or a survivor. He was part of her story now and her part of his. But the calm did not last. A new pulse entered his mind, a subtle, insidious vibration that carried a warning. More were coming. Not just curious intruders, but beings who knew her power and sought to control it. Eric felt a cold knot of fear. He looked at the queen, who tilted her massive head, sensing the change as well. Their bond would be tested. Their trust, their courage, and their connection to each other. And yet, deep down, he knew something vital. Together, they were stronger than any force that approached. As dawn broke over the alien forest, painting the valley in soft light, Eric sat beside the queen, fingers brushing her shimmering scales. The warmth, the rumble, the shared understanding, It all filled him with a mixture of hope and dread. The story of the human and the alien queen had only just begun. Battles, discoveries, and dangers awaited. And the bond they shared, the bond that bridged species, worlds, and time itself, would determine the fate of more than just themselves. The forest whispered around them, shadows moved in the distance, and a new chapter of their journey began. Eric tightened his grip on the queen's side, feeling her pulse against his hand, and understood one simple truth. He would not leave her, and she would not leave him. But the universe was vast, and the shadows were gathering. The alien forest of Vera was alive with movement, even in the quiet of dawn. Mist clung to the glowing moss and twisted vines, giving the landscape an otherworldly shimmer. Eric walked carefully beside the alien queen, whose massive form glided silently through the valley. Each step of her seemed to ripple the ground, yet she moved with a grace that defied her size. The events of the previous night lingered in Eric's mind. The attack had been a warning, a test. Whoever had sent those intruders now knew of her presence, and they would not rest. He had seen the tension in her posture, the sharpness in her gaze. She was powerful, yes, but even she was vulnerable. Eric glanced at her, unsure how to bridge the gap between human and alien. Words seemed inadequate, yet he needed to connect. "You don't have to face them alone," he said softly. Her vibration responded, a slow, low hum that resonated through his chest. It was not words, but he understood it as agreement. Her loneliness, her centuries of isolation, had begun to thaw, if only slightly. They moved deeper into the forest, seeking higher ground where Eric could get a better view of the surrounding terrain. The cliffs above the valley offered vantage points and a sense of safety. But as they climbed, the queen's pulse shifted again, a warning urgent and sharp. Eric stopped mid-step, senses alert. From the shadows of the forest, figures emerged, smaller than the previous attackers but faster and more coordinated. They were humanoid in shape but entirely alien in nature, long limbs, chitin-like armor, and eyes that glowed with unnatural light. Their movements were precise, as though guided by a hive mind. The queen stopped, her massive body coiling protectively around Eric. He felt her tension, her readiness to strike. He knew that if she lost control even slightly, the energy that radiated from her could devastate the valley. "You're not just fighting for yourself," Eric whispered, more to steady his own nerves than to speak to her. "We're in this together." The queen moved with fluid grace, deflecting attacks with her tail and the shimmering sweep of her massive limbs. Eric ran beside her, dodging debris and guiding her movements with careful gestures. It was a dance of power and trust, one that required both courage and instinct. Hours passed in a blur. Eric learned more about the queen's abilities than he had imagined possible. She could manipulate energy, reshape the ground beneath her, and communicate with him through vibrations that conveyed thought, emotion, and strategy simultaneously. And yet he saw her restraint. She did not unleash her full power, not yet. She trusted him to help maintain balance. As the attackers retreated, Eric allowed himself a moment of relief. But the forest remained tense, alive with the feeling that more dangers lurked nearby. The queen's vibration carried a faint trace of worry, and he knew that the calm was temporary. That night the valley was quiet, but sleep was impossible. Eric sat beside the queen, her massive body coiled like a protective shadow around the tent. He reached out, brushing a hand against her iridescent scales. The contact sent a ripple of warmth through him, a reminder of their connection, fragile but real. "You've carried so much," he whispered. "All this time alone, I can feel it." And yet beneath it all he sensed hope. She had never allowed herself to feel companionship in centuries, and now she was letting him in. In the days that followed, Eric and the queen explored the valley together. He learned to read the subtle shifts in her vibrations, understanding when she was wary, curious, or thoughtful. In turn, she seemed to adapt to him, tempering her power to align with his presence. Their bond deepened, not just through survival, but through trust, patience, and shared understanding. But the danger was never far away. Strange structures appeared on the horizon, towers of black stone and pulsating energy. They were alien in design, evidence of a faction seeking to harness the queen's power. The forest creatures moved cautiously around these structures, and the air was thick with tension. One evening, while Eric studied one of the towers from a cliff above, a vision struck him. It was the queen's warning. The faction had discovered a weakness, a way to separate her from her anchor, to control her power without regard for her will. The thought sent a chill through him. If she were captured, the consequences would be catastrophic, not just for the valley, but for the entire planet. He returned to the queen, urgency in every step. "They've found a way to control you," he said, his voice low but firm. We need to act before it's too late. The bond between them pulsed with intensity, a reminder that they were stronger together. Eric placed a hand against her side, sending calm through the connection. She responded, restraining the surge of energy that threatened to overwhelm her. Plans were made. They would move under the cover of darkness, using the forest's natural camouflage and her immense power to approach the towers. Eric would guide her through the terrain, helping her avoid traps and ambushes. And when the moment came, they would strike with precision, not destruction, for control, not chaos. The night of the mission arrived. Shadows stretched across the valley, and the alien towers glowed faintly against the darkness. Eric felt the familiar vibration of the Queen, coiled and ready. Together, they moved through the forest like a single entity, silent, cautious, and aware. The first tower loomed ahead, black stone glinting under the faint light of the moons. Energy pulses traveled along its surface, a silent warning to intruders. The Queen's presence vibrated through him, steady and controlled. Eric felt the weight of their combined purpose, survival, protection, and the bond that had grown between them. As they approached the tower, alarms sounded, a warning of detection. The Queen shifted, energy coiling around her like living armor. Eric felt the surge but held his ground, sending calm through the bond. She responded, tempering the force, restraining the destructive power that had once made her so feared. They infiltrated the tower's perimeter, avoiding sensors and patrolling sentries. Eric's knowledge of human tactics, combined with the Queen's power, allowed them to move unseen. And yet, the tension never left him. Every shadow could conceal danger, every sound could signal attack. Inside the tower, they discovered a chamber filled with devices designed to manipulate her energy, to control her mind. The sight filled Eric with both fear and determination. He understood now the stakes. This was more than survival. It was a test of trust, courage, and the bond they shared. The Queen's vibration deepened, acknowledging the threat and the need for restraint. Together, they disabled the devices, her power flowing in controlled pulses guided by his presence. Each step required precision, communication, and trust. And through it all, Eric marveled at her strength, grace, and intelligence, qualities that made him respect her even more. By dawn, the chamber was secure, the devices neutralized, and the tower rendered harmless. Exhausted but victorious, they returned to the valley, the forest alive with the first light of morning. Eric rested against the Queen's side, feeling the warmth and vibration that had become his anchor. For the first time, he allowed himself to hope. They had survived, yes, but more than that, they had learned to trust each other, to rely on the bond that bridged human and alien, fear and courage, loneliness and companionship. Yet even in victory, the shadow of future trials loomed. The faction that sought to control her would not give up, and the universe beyond the valley was vast and unpredictable. Eric knew that their bond would be tested again, harder, closer, and more dangerous than before. He closed his eyes, letting the vibration of the Queen's presence soothe him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was no longer alone, and neither was she. The valley was quiet, but the air hummed with anticipation. Somewhere beyond the cliffs and forests, shadows were gathering. And when the time came, Eric and the alien Queen would face them together, bound by trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond that had begun in a storm on a distant alien world. The valley lay under a blanket of silver moonlight, quiet but tense. The twin moons of Vera reflected off the glowing moss, casting long shadows across the cliffs. Eric stood at the edge of the valley, his heart pounding. He could feel her, the alien Queen, looming behind him, her massive form coiled like a living fortress. The bond they shared had grown deeper than either had expected, but tonight it would be tested like never before. The warning had come hours earlier. The faction that sought to control her power had discovered a way to invade the valley. This time they would not merely test her, they would attempt to capture her, to strip her of autonomy and turn her immense energy into a weapon. Eric swallowed hard. He had grown to trust her, to depend on her presence as much as she depended on him. And yet fear clawed at him. He knew the cost if they failed. The ground trembled faintly, a warning in itself. From the cliffs, alien figures emerged, swift, deadly, and precise. Unlike the previous intrusions, these attackers were prepared, coordinated, and aware of the Queen's abilities. They moved like shadows, merging with the darkness of the forest. The Queen's vibration filled Eric's chest, steadying him, guiding him. He could feel her power, immense and coiled like a living storm. And yet there was restraint. She would not strike without him anchoring her, guiding her focus. Together, they were not just predator and prey. They were a single force, a balance of intelligence, courage, and raw power. "Stay close," Eric whispered, his hand brushing against her scales. The vibration that pulsed through him was her acknowledgement, a heartbeat shared between two beings separated by worlds but united by choice. The intruders advanced, energy pulses cutting through the darkness. Trees and rocks shivered as the queen moved with fluid, almost liquid grace, deflecting attacks and creating shields of pulsing light. Eric ran alongside her, weaving through obstacles, guiding her strikes, and keeping their movements synchronized. The battle was relentless. Each wave of attackers seemed more determined than the last, testing their endurance and trust. Eric felt the queen's energy surge in response to the danger, an almost overwhelming force that could have destroyed everything in the valley if unleashed fully. But he held his ground, sending calm and control through the bond. Slowly, deliberately, she restrained herself, channeling the energy with precision rather than chaos. Hours passed like minutes. Sweat and fatigue mingled with adrenaline, yet neither faltered. The bond they had nurtured over days of quiet understanding and shared danger now became their greatest weapon. They moved as one, a rhythm of human courage and alien strength, each step a testament to trust and shared purpose. At last, they reached the heart of the intruders' formation, a towering device black and humming with energy designed to capture the queen's power. Eric's stomach tightened. If activated, it could drain her completely, leaving her vulnerable, or worse. "We have to destroy it," he said firmly. The queen's vibration responded, charged with determination. She lowered herself toward the device, coiling her immense body around it. Eric guided her movements, placing his hands on her scales to channel her energy carefully. Together, they focused, not with brute force, but with precision, merging human ingenuity with alien power. The device shuddered and sparked as her energy coursed through it. The intruders rushed forward, desperate to stop them. But the queen anticipated their moves, her massive form moving like liquid shadow, deflecting attacks while Eric guided each surge with careful control. A final pulse of energy shattered the device, sending waves of light across the valley. The intruders recoiled, defeated by the combination of her power and his steady guidance. Silence fell once more, broken only by the soft hum of the queen's breathing or the vibration that resonated through him like a living heartbeat. Eric exhaled, exhausted but elated. He looked at the queen, her massive head lowering toward him. Her glowing eyes met his, and in that moment he felt something he had never expected: gratitude, trust, and something deeper, unspoken but undeniable. You saved me," he whispered, though he knew it was more than that. They had saved each other. Her vibration pulsed softly against him, carrying a weight of emotion he could barely comprehend. She had not only fought for her freedom, but for the bond they shared, for the trust that had grown between them in days of uncertainty, danger, and quiet understanding. The first light of dawn crept across the valley, painting the forest in gold and violet. The storm of battle had passed, leaving a fragile calm. Eric sat beside the queen, leaning against her scales, feeling the warmth and steady pulse that had become a lifeline. "I don't know what comes next," he said quietly. "The universe out there, it's bigger than this valley, and there will be more who want to control you." He understood they would face whatever came together. They were bound not just by circumstance, but by choice. And in that choice lay strength, courage, and hope. Days passed in quiet preparation. Eric and the queen explored the valley, strengthened their bond, and learned more about each other. He taught her about human ingenuity, about strategy, patience, and subtlety. She showed him the depth of her power, the weight of her responsibility, and the resilience of her spirit. Together, they were not just allies, they were partners in the truest sense, connected by trust, understanding, and mutual respect. Yet even in calm, there was tension. The shadows beyond the valley did not disappear, and Eric knew the universe would test them again. But for now, he allowed himself a rare moment of peace. He sat beside the queen as the twin moons of Vera rose in the sky, casting silver light across the glowing moss. Her massive form coiled around the tent, a protective shadow that radiated warmth and energy. He reached out, brushing his fingers along her scales, feeling the vibration that had become part of him. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. Her vibration pulsed in response, steady and gentle, a heartbeat that resonated through him like a promise. For the first time, he felt that they were truly equal partners, bound not by fear or necessity, but by choice, respect, and trust. As dawn approached, the horizon burned with soft light. The valley, the cliffs, and the forest were quiet, yet alive with anticipation. Somewhere beyond the visible horizon, dangers awaited. And yet, Eric knew they were ready. Together, human courage and alien power formed a bond that could not easily be broken. The queen shifted, lowering her massive head to rest near him. He felt her energy, powerful and restrained, flowing through the valley like a quiet river. It was both calming and exhilarating, a reminder that the universe was vast, unpredictable, and full of wonder. Eric leaned against her, letting the bond they had forged carry him into a fragile, precious calm. The events of the past days had tested them, shaped them, and revealed a truth neither had expected. Connection, trust, and courage could bridge even the widest divides. The horizon glowed with the first rays of the sun, painting the valley in light that reflected off the queen's scales. Eric knew this was only the beginning, that challenges awaited, and that their story would continue beyond this valley, beyond the planet, into the vastness of the universe. But for now, they had won and they had each other. The bond between human and alien queen was unbreakable, forged in trust, tested in battle, and strengthened in the quiet moments of understanding. And as they watched the twin suns rise over Vera, Eric felt a quiet certainty. No matter what dangers the universe held, together they could face them all. The universe was vast. Shadows still moved beyond the valley. Threats would come again. But the human and the alien queen, bound by courage, trust, and understanding, were ready. And that bond, stronger than fear, greater than power, would guide them through the darkness into the light of a new dawn.